A bill that would legalize the use of cannabis by adults, create a regulatory framework for cannabis products, test products, expunge cannabis-related convictions for nonviolent offenses, and much more is moving through both the House and the Senate. Senator Lindsey Port is the chief author of the bill in the Senate, and she now joins me in the studio. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Shannon.
Why is now the right time for Minnesota to legalize cannabis use for adults?
Prohibition of cannabis is a failed system. It hasn't worked, and it's done incredible harm to our communities. We're starting to see across the country a switch in legalization of cannabis, in attitudes around cannabis, and Minnesota has been moving in that direction with the legalization of the low-dose hemp THC products last year. Really showed that we have a Minnesota market that's ready for this.
This would be a major societal change. Some Minnesotans, my age and older, will remember the educational efforts of the past to discourage people from using drugs. And you kind of have already touched on this, but how have conceptions about cannabis use in particular changed?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a child of the DARE generation, so this is very real in my own life. I think societally, attitudes have changed a lot. People have now sort of found different paths into a cannabis understanding, certainly with the growth of edibles, I think has massively changed across the country sort of attitudes. It's no longer, just smoking a joint in a way that maybe you would have pictured in the past, but it's in low-dose gummy forms that help you sleep. It's in in an edible form or a drink, a THC beverage, in ways that people see fitting in their everyday lives. I really think we've also come to an understanding as a country that the war on drugs has not been successful, and we've paid incredible prices for that war on drugs, and it hasn't offered a benefit to our country, and so I think that has really helped participate in that change of attitude.
The federal government still classifies cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance. What are the implications of legalizing it in Minnesota when it does remain illegal at the federal level?
Yeah, this is a complicated question, but we're working really closely with other states who've gone through this as well. We also are in conversations with our federal partners who are talking about moving that classification down at least a level, which would help. But one of the biggest things is, it's still, we cannot cross state lines. Like, that will be a big part of it, is it will be illegal to move it across state lines. So we are doing the best we can to make sure that we have a market that is grown in Minnesota, that is sold in Minnesota, that is run by Minnesotans, that can actually meet the needs of the market. Because I think the thing that we've learned the most from other states is when you don't have a legal market that meets the needs, you really have an opportunity for an illicit market, which is much more dangerous. And we are trying to do everything we can to make sure that we meet the needs of the legal market.
There's been some debate over the proper age for when cannabis use should be legal. I think the bill says 21, but there have been proponents that think it should be 25 because the brain is still developing. Where do you come down on that question?
Yeah, this is a question we've had a lot of discussion on. And in fact, I've worked a lot with the doctors in my caucus, particularly with Dr. Elise Mann on this, who's really seen some of these harms in the ER that she works in. And we really came down at the end of the day that the best thing that we can do is educate folks on the risks of consuming cannabis before you're 25, really on the risks of consuming cannabis in general, the impairment levels. This gets into the arguments of safe driving and things like that. Education is the #1 preventer of increases in adverse effects of using cannabis. So that is a big part that we wrote into the bill. The other piece I come down on is, as a society, we have decided that at 21 you are an adult. And the best thing that we can do is provide the information, provide the education, but at that point, Minnesotans need to make the decision that's right for them.
I've heard you testify on many occasions about how this bill will promote equity on multiple levels. First, why is it important to expunge nonviolent cannabis-related criminal records from the past And how many people will have their records then cleared up? How will that benefit?
Absolutely. This is a huge part of the bill and probably the reason that I agreed to take it on. The prohibition of cannabis just has not provided positive impacts to our society, and it has been incredibly detrimental, particularly to communities of color. Black Minnesotans and white Minnesotans use cannabis at a roughly equal rate. Yet Black Minnesotans are criminalized for it, prosecuted for it, and have records for it at more than 4 times the amount of white Minnesotans. It is a racial justice issue, and that the cost of that has been borne by communities of color. So it is critical that we undo some of that harm, and that's where the expungements come in. With the current language as it is, that first level of expungement, which is for the misdemeanors, the gross misdemeanors, the nonviolent possession, sort of that kind of thing, that will be automatically expunged, will affect over 50,000 Minnesotans right away. Then there's a longer process for those who have felony convictions that a board will have to look at and decide if they need to be reclassified as a lower conviction, if they can be expunged entirely. There's not a button we can hit to go through those. It has to be done sort of person by person, and so we don't know what that amount will be.
Okay. Secondly, there will be grants and loan programs for training and startup assistance for the products and businesses that are expected to result from the legalization of cannabis. How will it be possible to channel that funding to those communities that have been harmed historically by the prohibition, and how can you ensure that there is an appetite in those communities to move in this direction?
Well, there's definitely an appetite. I can tell you that right away. We're already hearing from folks in these communities who know that really, because of the way their communities have been over-policed for things like cannabis, and people have been criminalized for them, which has, stopped them from getting jobs, from moving into new housing, things like that. There's really been a loss of intergenerational wealth because of the criminalization of drugs. And so there is already an appetite that they are talking about. They really want to get into this industry that has harmed their communities so much, to make sure that they can build that intergenerational wealth, that they can build businesses that they are proud of, that are built here in Minnesota, right in their neighborhoods. So I'm not at all concerned about the appetite. The making sure that those grants and loans actually go to the communities is a part we're working really hard on. There is a social equity application that has different criteria. You have to be from an area that has had a certain significant impact from prohibition. There's a number of criteria that have to be met, and that process will not happen overnight. Those applications will take time to process, which is part of the reason that we know we have a little bit of a longer runway once we pass this bill before actual legalization happens, is because we want to get that piece right.
And finally, how much money will legalization bring into the state coffers? How will it be taxed, and what will those dollars be used for? Will it be a windfall for the state or not?
It will not. We really have thought very, very hard about this. And currently in the bill, the tax rate is 8%, which, based on our estimates of use and the market, is what it would take to run this program, to run the licensing, the regulation, the testing, all of that, the education pieces, public service announcements, things like that. That's what it's going to take to run those programs. We don't see cannabis legalization and high taxing of it as a way to pay for everything else in the state. In states that have gone really high for taxing, what we've seen is the legal product is very expensive, and it allows for an illicit market to continue, which an illicit market is much more likely to sell to underage users. It's not tested, it's not safe. So we really want to keep that tax rate down, make sure it pays for the program, but that's the extent of it.
Senator Lindsey Port, I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shannon.